Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's last post ceremony. My name is Troy Clayton, and joining us today from the Australian Army is Warrant Officer Class 2 Graham Bell, who is currently one of the memorial's soldiers in residence. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and their families that love and support them. We also acknowledge the members of the RSL Services Clubs Association, RSL Victoria, and RSL Queensland, who are watching this ceremony broadcast across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection by visitors as well as students on behalf of the following schools. From New South Wales, Rowena Public School, from Victoria, St Catherine's School, Toorak, and from Queensland, St Joseph's School from Barden. If you're able, please stand and join in singing the National Anthem. Thank you, students. You may be seated. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn their loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we'll read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection.
Today, we remember and pay tribute to Private Karl Aanonsen. Karl Aanonsen was born in 1887 near Arendal in Norway, the son of Arnon and Emily Aanonsen. He grew up in Norway and migrated to Australia when he was about 21 years of age. He worked as a linesman in the town of Dollar in Victoria, but also travelled around Australia. In September 1916, Aanonsen was in Brisbane when he decided to enlist in the Australian Imperial Force. He had enlisted the previous year, but for reasons that are unclear, had not completed his training. Aanonsen undertook initial training at Enoggera Camp near Brisbane before embarking on board the transport ship Kyara in November. When the ship made a stop in Perth, Aanonsen disembarked and failed to re-embark. However, not long afterwards, he boarded another transport ship, the Berrima, and continued on to the war. Whether deliberate or accidental, his absence led him to spending the voyage in detention. In February 1917, Aanonsen landed in England and completed his training at the army camps on the Salisbury Plain. In May, he proceeded overseas to the fighting on the Western Front, joining his unit, the 28th Australian Infantry Battalion in France. Aanonsen saw his first battle in October at Broodcinda, outside the town of Ypres, just over the border in Belgium. The 28th Battalion achieved its objectives, but came under heavy German artillery fire. Aanonsen was struck by shell fragments in his back and badly wounded. He was evacuated to England to recoup in hospital. In late November, he returned to the training camps on Salisbury Plain. He spent the winter of 1917 and 1918 there and began training with Vickers medium machine guns. In the crowded camp conditions, Aanonsen became ill with influenza and spent a little over a week in hospital. At the end of March in 1918, German forces began what would be their final large-scale attack of the war, known as the German Spring Offensive. In response to these assaults, Australian troops were concentrated around the important rail hub city of Amiens in northern France. In April, Aanonsen reached the area and joined his new unit, the 4th Australian Machine Gun Battalion. At the village of Villers-Bretonneux, east of Amiens, his unit helped to stop the German advance. Aanonsen was slightly wounded, but remained on duty. With the 4th Machine Gun Battalion, Aanonsen participated in some of the decisive battles in the final Allied offensive against German positions. In early July, the unit took part in a relatively small-scale battle at the French village of Hamel. During this battle, and for the first time in Australian experience, low-flying aircraft dropped ammunition to the machine gunners using parachutes. On the 4th of November 1918, Aanonsen was admitted to a field hospital in France with influenza. The armistice was signed on the 11th of November, but by then his condition was worsening and had become pneumonia. On the 14th of November 1918, a few days after the end of the hostilities, Karl Aanonsen died of pneumonia in hospital. He was 31 years old. Aanonsen was buried at Abbeville Communal Cemetery Extension in France, alongside more than 2,500 British Commonwealth and French First World War soldiers. He was survived by his parents, who still lived near Arendal in Norway. Private Karl Aanonsen is listed on the Roll of Honour on my right, among almost 62,000 Australians who died while serving in the First World War. A photograph of his headstone is displayed today beside the pool of reflection. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Private Karl Aanonsen, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the Ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozières or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. We'd like to thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial and wish you all a very good evening. Thank you.